Unless you've got loads of market research behind you, your strategy is always just the best guess. We're in a world where there is so much noise that if you aren't prepared to give value up front, if you're too guarded, then you will never break through. I teach this sort of triangle 3 parts on marketing strategy. And the point of the 3 parts is that it is cyclical. You're meant to keep coming around. And when you get data, reassess your audience, reassess your content, and then reassess that data again.
Welcome to another episode of Better Business, Better Life. I'm your host, Debra Chantry-Taylor, and I'm passionate about helping entrepreneurs and their leadership teams lead a better life by creating a better business. I started this podcast to allow entrepreneurs to hear from other entrepreneurs about what's worked and what hasn't worked for them. And we have a mixture of people who actually use EOS in the business, but also business experts, people who are experts in their field with skills that can help entrepreneurs. And today's guest is one of those experts. So he has developed the marketing momentum ratio. He admits to being a closet introvert. So whilst he comes across as being very extroverted when he's out and about, it does drain him. And he is an accidental entrepreneur who is passionate about helping other entrepreneurs find their way. In the episode today, Brendan is going to share with you his marketing momentum ratio. We're going to talk about some of the mistakes that people make when they're looking at marketing and hopefully answer the question, that your people are saying they're doing a lot of marketing, but they're not really seeing the results. And what can you ask yourself when that is happening to you? So let me introduce to you Brendan Lee. He is the founder and head coach of Conversions Today. Welcome to the show, Brendan.
So lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. In my introduction, I described you, or you described yourself to me, and I described you as the accidental entrepreneur. So why don't you share with us a little bit about what that means? How did you become an accidental entrepreneur?
Yeah, I certainly still to this day, if you went back in time and asked younger Brendan if he'd want to start his own business, I'd still say no. It just, the opportunity sort of just came about. I am a proud child of immigrant parents who worked really hard to get here and studied really hard through university for the opportunity to have a corporate job. So my whole life was ingrained to me. That's what we're here for. That's the opportunity Australia gives you. Study as hard as you can, get great grades, and then climb the corporate ladder. So that's the journey I was on. I didn't know any different, hadn't thought any different in my own sort of worldview. And then the opportunity came about one day that I was, sort of in my corporate world. I had 2 former colleagues independently telling me that they wanted to work with me, or they, with the businesses that they were at now, needed my expertise. And apparently neither of them could afford me full time. And so that naturally became this opportunity to become a consultant to both of them in a part-time capacity. And overnight, I was a consultant. I spent my 5th day seeing if anybody else thought what I knew was valuable. And much to my surprise, they did. And so, built a client base. And then naturally from there, that word of mouth took off, and I had to build a team to deal with all the work I was getting. And so I became an agency all of a sudden. Had no intention of starting an agency ever.
Okay. And just tell us a little bit about that journey. I mean, people always sort of think that things grow in this beautiful kind of like, straight line, hockey stick curve. Has it been like that?
Certainly not. For me, it's been very up and down. I think by starting it by accident, I was very fortunate. I don't get me wrong. I'm very fortunate to have that soft landing pad to be able to try an idea. But because of that, I didn't have a strong sort of direction or passion for where it was going. I let the wind take me where it was going, and the wind was very kind to me. Build up some really strong, client base through word of mouth. Now the part where it certainly was not a hockey stick, or was a hockey stick, but in the negative, was most of my client base was in hospitality. And when COVID hit, it was a challenging time for them and became a challenging time for me. But it was a wonderful opportunity to reset and say, well, now that I've done this for 5 years, do I actually still want to do this? And, if I am going to do it, what should the business be, rather than taking what comes my way? What am I passionate about? What am I good at? And the team as well.
So a more deliberate strategy around what is really going to make your heart sing and what you can do well. Okay. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah. So I'm in the agency side of my business that sort of was born out of COVID. We focus very much on, I always say that if you think that your subject matter is very difficult to understand or complex, then we're the best agency for you. So think about, I guess we work a lot with law firms, we work with med tech, accountants, people whose subject matter needs to be very, very specific and needs to be respected. But at the same time, before working with us, they do a lot of essentially dry content that doesn't speak to the audience. It sort of just puts out the educational content that they have on their brains. So we walk that tightrope of being able to push them to say, look, marketing has a purpose in your business. You can't just sort of say whatever you want to say because it might not attract the right people or be put in a form that is attractive. It's our job to package it up, keep it respectful and accurate, but put it in a format that's going to be appealing.
So people who are listening in are probably sort of thinking, oh yeah, there's a million marketing agencies out there that do that. They all say that they do that. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think the reason I chose that niche was because the team that I work with, I've always sort of worked with more experienced than senior people. For better or for worse, I don't have a lot of patience to train juniors. So I've always, had a team of more experienced people. And I think that's what gives us that expertise to be able to bring that real world perspective as well as experience into these conversations. So it puts us in a better position to push back or have more confidence and more perspective to give an educated pushback sometimes when clients are like, no, it's got to be done this way, or we're not afraid to say, look, you know what you know well, but we know what we know well too. So let us, sort of guide you in the parts that we know.
And I know when we were talking before we came on the podcast, you talked about that, you also help to teach people how to implement it. But before we get into that, I guess if people are listening in, what would be their trigger or something for them to think, actually, we need some help? Like, where do they get to before they actually kind of go, we need some help?
Mm, that's a great question. One of the things that I've found working, not obviously not all clients have built the same. And one clear delineation I found was we were always we wanted to work in partnership and always wanted our clients to understand and own the strategy that we were setting for them. So the clients that didn't gel with us well were always the ones that said, I don't care, Brennan, just get the results. Like that's a nightmare statement for me in any scenario. And some agencies love that. They just go and burrow away and do their own thing and bring you the data. Whereas for me, it's like, hey, this is it's a collaboration. All of the content and strategy has to be born out of your business and the way that you speak and your own personalities as a brand. And so that's how we work. So I say all of that because we naturally then are teachers. Like it's no good for me to set a strategy that somebody doesn't understand. So we found that we were naturally teaching all the time anyway, whether we were running workshops or doing presentations. It was a lot of education of what we do and how the marketing works. And so naturally from there, I segued into, well, how can I deliver this same value in a different way so that I can help more people and help different people?
What are the biggest mistakes that you see people making?
One of the biggest mistakes for me, like I'm a data nerd, like even though I did a communications and PR degree and you would think it's all fluffy and words, I did, heavy sort of maths and economics through high school. I'm very logic driven. And I always say that my marketing is paint by numbers. It's a joke in our house. My wife always goes, oh, we have to do an invite for our kid's birthday. That's creative. You do that. It's marketing. And I'm like, well, I still don't consider myself creative. Like I'm very paint by numbers, but that's how I approach marketing as well. Everything needs to be data driven, numbers driven. And especially in this day and age, there's so much available that you can learn from. So why would you not take that, harness it, and optimize whatever plan you've got? And so, yeah, for me, the reason that the mistake that people make is they're not trying to track enough information, whether it be online or offline. And I think if I summarize it, offline is probably one of the biggest mistakes. People assume if it's offline that I can't collect data on it. Like if it's a phone call made to my phone call line, how do I track data? If it's a letterbox drop I've done, how do I track data? But all of those have, touch points and certain things that we can track to measure success and find improvements.
You may not know, but I have a sales and marketing background. And so for me, I've always been very, very passionate about marketing. And I see it as being a support function for the business to help the business achieve its goals. And, in EOS, we talk about our marketing strategy, which is really more about who is our ideal client. How do we communicate with them? Where do we reach them? We don't get into marketing specifics per se, but we certainly get them to think about who the ideal client is, because what I find is a lot of people, they try to be everything to everybody. And of course, trying to be everything to everybody doesn't really work. But also thinking about, where do we find them and how do we talk to them is a big thing that people don't think about. And you just mentioned the whole offline, online. People get a bit obsessed these days with digital and online because they see it as being, I think, maybe cheaper, more cost effective, more measurable. But it's not the be all and end all, is it?
Yeah, and certainly not. I think people look at it like it's a silver bullet, but there's no silver bullet. I mean, it's happening now with AI. Everyone just goes, "Oh, I'll just use ChatGPT to do all of my content," and great, all of a sudden I'll have 1 million followers. And it's, well, it's not how it works. They're all tools. The tools have always been there. The tools have always evolved. So a letterbox drop is the same available tool that AI is. It's just different tool, different time, different person that you're trying to target. And I love what you just said about EOS, because that's a really common thing. It's probably the next common mistake that I see people making, is that trying to be everything to everyone. The phrase that I find myself uttering a lot to people, because whenever I ask people who their ideal client is, they'll immediately, 90% of the time, I hear people tell me 5 or 6 different things. And I'm like, okay, I didn't ask you who could be a client. I asked you who's your best client. And that's a delineation I think that is really critical to make, because there's no point trying to market to everyone unless you have an unlimited budget.
Well, and even with it, I mean, I used to be the head of marketing for Tower Insurance over in New Zealand. I mean, we did have a very, very large budget. We had $3 million a year when I first joined. And so we could spend a lot of money on a lot of different things. But that doesn't mean that you should. And I'm a big data nerd as well. So if you do use data effectively and you start to work out, what really does give good return on investment, without discounting that certain marketing is not going to give you a direct response. I mean, there's a certain amount of always brand awareness versus direct response that you need to do. But we got to the point where we were very, very careful about what we did and how we spent things and looked at the data. And we're going to go into this in a bit more detail, but you don't want to be changing too many things at once. Because if you change everything at once, you actually don't know what is making the difference and what's changing. And so over the sort of 3.5 years I was there, we started with a $3 million marketing budget. We did a lot of tracking around data. We did a lot of tracking around, what results certain things got. We even got down to the point of knowing when TV commercials were the most effective, what was the right time slot, and how long. I used to look at the law of diminishing return. How long does a piece of creative actually last for? So I could tell you exactly how long before a piece of creative lost its kind of cut through, what kind of time it should be on TV, all that sort of stuff. By the time I finished there, I had a $9.5 million marketing budget, because I'd basically shown them that by giving me $1, I could give them back more than the average return on investment. And so they kept increasing the budget until we got to 9.5, because why wouldn't you? If you can give me $1 and I can make two, why wouldn't you keep giving me more dollars? Yeah. But bit of a squirrel moment there. It's really, I guess it's around, yes, you do need to still be specific, even with all of that budget. And we still were really, really clear about where the low-hanging fruit was, who were the ideal target market. And if you have the ideal target market, it doesn't mean that you're going to go, no, I can't deal with you, Brendan, because you're not the right target market. But you're not spending time, money, energy, effort trying to attract people who are not the right people.
Yeah, that's right. That person's going to come anyway, is what I say. You know what I mean? Like, your business is running now. Those people are finding you now. So an additional campaign to target somebody who's not that person is, there's no harm to be done. And the other thing that you touched on, which I love, is probably another error that I see is, like to think I've coined a term. I call it ROI reverse engineering. And so what I do with all of my marketing work is to say, what does success look like? What is it worth to the business? And then we can figure out backwards what you can afford to invest in it. Like, if you tell me the thing you're looking to sell is only worth $50 per customer, then we can't afford to spend more than $50 acquiring that customer. It's pretty simple maths, I would have thought. But not a lot of people do that. They sort of put it out there and go, if I just get leads, I'll turn them into some sort of a sale. And I'm like, well, do you know what that sale's even worth? Is it highly variable? Do you want to sell things that are worth more to your business? I'm sure you do. Like, let's find a way to do that.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because I remember having, when I used to teach this stuff, I was actually a tutor at the Marketing Association over in New Zealand many, many, many years ago. I ran their certificate of digital marketing. And I was really more the facilitator. I used to get experts in to talk about various topics, but I was a facilitator, and I had a good generalist understanding of marketing. And one of the things was, you'd have people sort of say, oh, but that piece of marketing is really expensive. And it's like, it's not about what it costs. I mean, at the end of the day, you can spend $500, but if it returns $10,000, then that was a really good investment. And I'd have business owners sort of say to me, oh, yeah, but if I put a TV commercial on, it's going to cost $5,000, but I can put an advert in the coffee news, it costs $200. And I'd say to them, yeah, but return on investment, you'd be better off taking me out for lunch, paying me $200 for a really nice lunch. I guarantee you probably get a better return on investment for that than you would spending it on that particular, not always. Coffee news can work. I'm not saying it can't work, but it's about the right channel for the right target audience and what you're trying to achieve. And sometimes the expensive items can actually produce amazing return on investment. But it has to come back to, like you said, what is the value of that customer to you? I have a marketing funnel myself for my business, for my EOS practice, where I know what my client is worth to me, and it's a significant amount of money sort of each year. And I don't take that lightly. I hope I give as much value as I get paid for. But I know what it's worth to me. And so when I have a client contact me and they want to get hold of a traction book, I don't just send the traction book. I send out a traction book. They get an elephant, they get a chocolate bar, they get a handwritten note, they get an entire package. And when that package arrives in the mail, I think all up, it cost me about $110 for each package. But I also know that for every 10 of those, I get usually around about sort of 4 initial meetings. I then get 2 who go into a deeper meeting and 1 will become a client. So 1 out of 10 becomes a client, where, 10 times 110, you can do the maths on that. It is still bloody good return on investment. But some people struggle with that because they go, but you're spending $110 for somebody who may never become a client. Yeah, yeah, I am.
Exactly right.
Exactly. But also, the 9 that maybe don't right now, but I tell you what, they might become influencers. That sounds like a terrible term, but they might be somebody, they might give that book to somebody else. They might talk about the fact that they got this beautiful pack from Deborah. They might become clients in the future. Not everything is about absolute direct response right here, right now. It's about building the brand for the future.
Lovely. Tell me about the elephant. I need to know about the elephant. What is it and why does it go in the pack?
So the ones I send are not quite as big as that one. That's my big Ellie there, but I have little baby ones that I send out. Still just as cute, but it's my specialty. My specialty is actually helping uncover the elephant in the room. So I help people have difficult conversations, things that they don't want to deal with, but they really need to for the greater good of the business. And, it's just one of those things. It's like I try and encourage some of my clients as well to think about when they get that pack, they were expecting a book, right? That's what they asked for. Suddenly they get this courier parcel that is a little bit odd shaped. It's not the norm. It comes onto their desk and it's like, oh, what is this? And when they open it up, they get the elephant. They also get a torch, actually. They get an elephant, a torch, a chocolate bar, and a traction book. And all of that is a lot more than they were expecting. So surprise and delight, they're getting a whole lot more than they were expecting. Hopefully this will score me some bonus marketing points. They get a handwritten note, but on that handwritten note is a QR code where they can go and do an online organizational checkup to see how their organization is going. And so I'm trying, I can potentially capture data through that if they choose to do that. But it's just that, yeah, it's the fact that it's something a little bit different. I believe, this is my personal belief, I think people rely too much on electronic stuff like LinkedIn messaging and I'm not, don't get me wrong, I have an email, I have LinkedIn. I do communicate through LinkedIn. I do have email newsletters that go out, but I just think that people do business with people and humans like surprises. They like things a little bit different.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I did the exact same thing actually with a campaign when I was trying to recruit medtech. And they were very valuable clients should they sign up. And so yeah, I had a similar pack that was worth well over $100 as well. And it was without doing the reverse engineering exercise, like, yeah, you can absolutely sit there and go, oh, that's a lot of money. But, if you sit there and go, well, this client's going to be worth 20 grand or whatever it is, then I'll pay 1,000 every day.
I had a client many, many years ago who actually used to send out iPads to clients, potential clients. And again, you kind of go, that's a lot of money. The actual reality was they weren't keeping that. The iPad kind of came back and got recycled. But if they signed up, they actually got a free iPad. So it was good. But it was just something a little bit different compared to what people were doing. But that's enough about me. That was a big squirrel moment. In terms of when I talk about squirrels, that's one of my tools in my kit. I talk about squirrels, or how a squirrel kind of is completely focused on a nut until it's not, until it sees something else and shoots off. I want to know more about data because I'm no longer a marketing expert. I definitely used to be back in the day, but I don't do that anymore. I'm an EOS expert. But in terms of the data, you mentioned that you can collect data even when it's not online. So what are some of the things that you can do? And then let's talk a little bit about What do you do with that data?
I mean, one for the obviously I mentioned earlier that my business was born out of COVID, so that was one good thing for me to come out of COVID. But one of the other good things was blatant, widespread use of QR codes. And I still vividly remember in 2016 having a meeting about a exhibition that we were running, and somebody told me about QR codes, and I was like, no one's going to download an app and then do this and blah blah blah, and they didn't. Sure, at the time they didn't, but now it's it's built into every phone app, and so yeah, that's one of the easiest things you just mentioned. If somebody's going to scan a QR code, for instance, off of a physical piece of paper, that's a great data point all of a sudden because rather than and I actually had this happen with a client. We did a letterbox drop. We did the QR code, and then we had a landing page. And you naturally assume that if you didn't have that data point and you just sent out the letters, you would just then need to know how many people called me. But what we were able to determine in between was a bit of a sense of how many people actually read the letter and were compelled enough to go and visit our website. And then when they visited the website, what did they do from there? And so what we were able to learn and tweak was we were like, hey, the letter's not the problem. People are coming to the website at a decent rate. Whatever they're seeing when they get to the website is confusing the heck out of them and no one's booking. So once we were able to fix that, we were able to fix the campaign.
And I think we talked a little bit about this offline, but we should talk about online now as well, is we talked about that sometimes people get a bit overexcited and so the campaign they're doing doesn't work and they go, oh, let's just throw that out and start all over again. But that's not necessarily the smartest way to do it, is it?
Certainly not. I preach that strategy should always be an active strategy, or I teach this sort of triangle 3 parts on marketing strategy. And the point of the 3 parts is that it is cyclical. You're meant to keep coming around, and when you get data, reassess your audience, reassess your content, and then reassess that data again, and just keep improving. You're better off running long campaigns that you can slowly get better. And this is the way, especially if you do want to get hooked up into digital, algorithms need time. So if you just go and throw out a campaign and then just conclude it didn't work in a month, maybe it would have worked if you A, gave it a little bit longer, but also B, just tweaked it a little bit. So yeah, that's something that I'm always talking about is, unless you've got loads of market research behind you, your strategy is always just the best guess. And so let the data improve that guess and pinpoint it.
Do you think that comes back to that we kind of live in an instant gratification world now? And so we kind of expect, because I mean, I have it even with EOS, where people come in, they expect that there's going to be some magic silver bullet, which is going to change everything immediately. And I have to tell them this is not going to happen. This is going to be 12 to 18 months to probably even 2 years before you truly start to see the real results. Sure, you'll get some wins initially, without a doubt. That's going to happen in the first 3 months, but there is no magic silver bullet. It's consistency. It's, as you said, like we always talk about in EOS, what's working, what's not working. What do we need to change? How do we change our focus? What's important? Let's not lose focus. Let's not change too often. Otherwise, we don't have, if everything's important, nothing's important. If we're changing our focus all the time, then nobody knows what they're supposed to be focused on. So do you see that with marketing as well?
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point. We are certainly in a phase, especially now in this new AI era, where everyone just thinks I say one phrase or push a button and everything gets done for me magically. And that's certainly not the case. And I think that's the case with marketing because it can be easy to produce. People go, okay, great. I'll throw something else on the wall and see if that sticks. But, and people stumble into success that way. I'm not saying that people haven't, but the thing that I'm always talking about is what's repeatable and scalable. If you find success that you can't repeat, then to me, what's the point?
Yeah. And I think also it's about the metrics. Like, what are you actually measuring? Because I think you said earlier, you can create some amazing content with AI and you can get 1 million followers, but so what? It's a so what test for me. So what? You've got 1 million followers. How many sales did it actually produce? Is it really attracting? Are those 1 million people actually people who are even your right target audience? Because you can create content that creates a huge following, but it's got nothing to do with, what you're offering, or they're people who will never, ever be your clients.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of when businesses come to me asking me, for instance, oh, Brendan, can you help me with social media? I always ask them, well, what's the goal here? And I, more often than not, I tend to hear, oh, we just want to grow our following. And I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, go ask your bank if you can pay the mortgage and following. And when you get your answer, well, let's have another conversation.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot, actually. It's funny how The world changes, but it never really does. I remember when I was at the Ice House many, many, many years ago, and I used to, after being with the Marketing Association, I also did some work with business owners and helped them around digital marketing, what was important. It was back in the early, early days of Facebook. I'm not even sure. I mean, LinkedIn was barely being used then. So it was Facebook. I don't think Insta was really a big thing then. TikTok definitely didn't even exist back then. But yeah, it was this whole thing is like people are like, we've got to be on social media. And I'd ask exactly the same thing, like, why? What is it about social media? What is the outcome, the business outcome you want to achieve from this? Because marketing is just a way to achieve your business outcome. And yeah, you can, I hadn't thought about the whole bank paying your mortgage, but yeah, there can be vanity metrics that might make you feel really, really good, but are they actually moving the needle?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I've started I don't know if you're familiar with the anti-social social club brand, but I sort of borrowed inspiration from that and sort of started a small little sort of movement of my own, which is the anti-vanity metrics club. I just, I, I just cannot stand when people, they ask for reporting from their agencies, or this is a common thing that I get. People come to me and say, Brendan, I've been working with this agency for a long time. They send me these reports every month, but I don't know what's working and what's not working. And so I inevitably will say, if you don't mind sharing, share some reports with me and we'll see what we're looking at. And the dashboards are all the same because they're the common dashboards that get spat out from all of these platforms. And they're all just measuring the same thing. And I'm like, well, every business has different objectives and goals. So how can they all be interested in the same dashboard or the same pie chart? So yeah, those to me, I see those reports and I just go, blah. I go, for starters, they're not telling you anything important. And most importantly, there was no insight in that report. I don't care what the data looks like. I want to know what am I doing?
What can you do with it? Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I'm a big, vanity metrics is a buzzword in my brain.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think the same thing happens with scorecards. Like, I mean, obviously, now working with EOS, we have scorecards of the business, and scorecards are meant to give you a finger on the pulse of the business. And so I often will challenge people and go, so what is that data actually telling you? Because it's all very well kind of going, yay, we ticked off that data point, but so what? So what is it actually telling us about the business? It's not a tick box exercise. This should be something we either look at and go, hey, things are going really, really well, everything's great, or actually we've got a potential issue here and what's going on. And again, no two scorecards will be the same. They might be similar. Some things that might be measured across all businesses, like hopefully revenue is always on their scorecard. But the other metrics and measurables change depending on what the business is and what they're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
So we've talked a little bit about some of the mistakes that they make. We've talked about, so, not capturing all the data and not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Is there anything that is common across most clients, or a common thing that's missed across most clients?
I think the thing that is common across most clients, we touched on it a little bit, but it's if you can understand what your target client, well, let me put it this way. The most common thing is to try and put the human back in the marketing. And what I mean by that is, so we talked about things like ideal customer persona and getting that right and getting your targeting right. But I believe also there's a real human side to that because that then naturally should flow into what is your messaging and what is your offer because it needs to appeal to that person. The common mistake, I guess, in that front is people will inevitably develop their messaging and their offer based on their own personality and what appeals to them. So, sometimes I deal with people who are like, Brendan, we have to create a calculator. And immediately I can tell, I'm like, with that person, I'm like, that's because you like calculator. I go, but does your ICP like calculators? Maybe we need to develop something different that will be appealing to them. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty common thing where, again, in this digital world, people forget that still it's a human on the other end of this. And in order to build that connection, it needs to start human. Otherwise, there's going to be a weird jarring point where it doesn't make sense.
And it's a good point because, I mean, I say we talk about target market, so we don't get into marketing personas per se or getting into real detail, but we just try and get the whole team to think about who that ideal client is. So we're on the same page in terms of what we're doing. Then I usually say to clients, go work with a marketing agency or work with your marketing team to develop all this stuff into things that are meaningful. But often, the people in the leadership team are not the people who are the ideal target market. So we're applying our lens to it, but we're not that kind of person. So in actual fact, as you said, what might work for us will not necessarily work for them. And I see it in communication styles, even, across the business as well, internally and externally. my business partner, I always joke because Adam loves to send voice messages. I hate voice messages. With a passion, because I don't like listen. I don't watch videos. I don't listen to stuff because my brain goes a million miles an hour. And if you give me something written, I can speed read and get everything I need from it in a heartbeat. If I have to watch a video or listen to a voice message, I've got to go at their speed. Does not work for me. Which means that, so he communicates in the style that he likes. It doesn't work for me, and vice versa. And we've had to make a conscious effort to kind of go, when I want to send something to him, giving it in a style that actually works for him and vice versa. And that's really what marketing is all about, right? It's about having communication points that work for your people.
Exactly, exactly. It's the amount of people that tell me, oh, but I want to build a following on Instagram. And then they'll tell me, oh, but I'm targeting 45-year-old males. And it's like, there's not a lot of them on Instagram. Like, why did you pick that channel? Like, pick the right channel. And also then when you're on that channel, understand the way in which you communicate. Like, don't just because Instagram has a lot of fluffy, inspirational content that is popular. Again, if you're targeting a 45-year-old male, if that's the platform we're going to go with, that might not be the content that lands, the style of the messaging that's going to land with that particular person that you're targeting. So again, you could build a million followers, but they might all be, 25-year-old females.
Yeah, which means nothing for the business. No business outcomes in there. What's your view on AI? I mean, I know it's such a buzzword, and we've done a few podcasts on it because it is such a buzzword. And I think there's AI is definitely changing the way that we do things, and some good things and some bad things. But from a marketing perspective, tell me a bit about your views on AI.
First view is huge fan, but I'm a huge fan in it being used correctly and in the right places. So, I've just written a series that I'm about to publish called Stop Skynet. And if I sort of jump to I don't know if you're familiar with the Terminator movies at all.
Yes, of course. Yeah, yeah.
So in the Terminator movies, there's Skynet and it's the big bad evil future that's coming because the robots are going to take over. But if I sort of fast forward to the end of my 7-part series, essentially my point is that the AI and the robots weren't the problem because Arnold is a robot and Arnold's the hero in the thing because he was used correctly, programmed correctly, taught to understand humans, reflect humans as best he could. So my whole point with AI is it depends on how you're using it. I definitely see, and we sort of mentioned this earlier, I see people using it very lazily and sloppily and trying to get a silver bullet, sort of one prompt result out of it. Whereas what I'm pushing with AI is generally, it's something. It's funny. My dad probably didn't impart a lot of pearls of wisdom in my life, but one of them that I'll never forget, and it's usually because he was telling me off, to be honest, but he would say, Brendan, 2 ears, one mouth. He goes, you should be listening and thinking twice as much as you are talking. And obviously I talk too much. So that was why he was saying that. But I apply the same thing to people with AI. I sort of say to them, I hope that you've been researching and asking it reflective questions about what you're about to do twice as much before you start to do it, because that is what will make it more personalized, more human, and just less sloppy.
And let's face it, whether we like it or not, they are paid models. They are designed to get you to use them more, which means that they're often going to tell you what you want to hear as opposed to what you need to hear. And so there is an element of making sure that you are actually challenging them and yeah, having them really not just be the nice person who's like, oh, that's a fabulous idea, Deborah. Yes, absolutely, you should do that.
I definitely went through a phase there where I was like, hey, I'm just going to keep doing this because it gives me all the positive reinforcement I want. But yeah, it was not productive. And so, yeah, one of the big things so when I'm teaching what I do now, in a big part of my business, I run a program called Conversions Today. And a big part of it is I only expect to take sort of an hour and a half to 2 hours of somebody's time on any given fortnight. But now with the power of AI, given the correct guidance, we can move the needle so much for, whether it's a business owner themselves or they've got sort of a VA or a junior marketer. There's so much, if we can set the direction correctly in 2 hours, the amount of output that AI can give us in the rest of that fortnight is unbelievable compared to even just 6 months ago.
And it's moving at such a pace. We've actually got a couple of AI agents in our accountability chart in our team that don't do various bits of work for us. One of them is very much around just writing stuff, but a couple of the GPTs in that agent are very much been around our two personas. We have two personas in our business. and we sanity check things with them, and we kind of go, here's what we're thinking about doing. Tell me what you think as the ideal persona. And it's great because we get some feedback from them that is more critical. The other one is more around the sounding board and the chance to kind of challenge ideas and things. And we use that to make sure that when we're wanting to do something, she has, they're both she's because they're both little mini versions of me. She's been taught to push back in the same way that I would. Her name is Ellie, after the elephant. What is the elephant in the room that I'm not thinking about? And sometimes I just want to kill her because, she really does. She does. She pushes back and she actually really challenges me. And sometimes I get quite defensive. It's like, but it's good because you don't, just like you don't want yes people in your business, you don't want yes AIs either because they feed the dopamine. They're designed to feed our dopamine. They're designed to make us feel good. And of course, that can be dangerous.
Absolutely can be. Yeah.
Yeah. And vanilla.
Yeah, well, vanilla's a good one. I mean, the amount of slop I'm seeing on LinkedIn at the moment where it's just like, oh, I can tell 100% from that structure that's been written out of AI with no effort at all.
The only thing is, and this is one of my things, my pet peeves. I mean, the whole M dash thing is obviously a little bit of a giveaway from AI, except that the M dash is actually a really nice piece of grammar.
I used it all the time before, and now I'm like second guess it every time.
I try and take them out now because I kind of, if I'm doing anything with AI, because I kind of go, it looks like it's written by AI, but I mean, it was a good piece of grammar that's been obviously overutilized. But tell me what, I mean, yes, people see it as a shortcut, right? They see it as a great, I can just get shit out so much, so not shit out, get stuff out that's so much quicker. What are the real pitfalls?
So to me, and this is another thing that I speak about, which is I talk about having a marketing momentum ratio. And so think about it as a simple 80-20 principle for now anyway. I always say that you should spend about 20% on strategy and 80% on doing, most businesses. And the reason for that is I've seen the two polar opposites. I've seen in my agency life, I've seen businesses where we spend nearly 50% of the time doing work in progress meetings and reporting and strategy sessions and workshops. And I'm like, when are we actually doing anything? Like, when do we put a campaign live? So I feel like it's a little out of kilter in that sense. But then I've also seen the complete opposite, which is what we speak about with LinkedIn and getting stuff out quickly, which is it's 100% of the time on doing. People just go, oh, if I can just do more things, I'll be more successful. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute. If you're just doing a lot of things that you're not sure what relevance they play, maybe you can do 20% less of the things and think about the 80% that you are doing. What purpose does it serve? How does it all stitch together? And as you alluded to before, one of the things that I get all of my clients to do is we'll create a custom project or a GPT about the actual strategy and let it push back and say like, hey, we're about to do this. Does that work? And if you get it to push back, sometimes you'll be stunned to be like, oh, actually, yeah, maybe that's not worth doing. So that's a quick, easy way to figure out your marketing ratio, really. If you're going to spend an hour doing something, you spend, less than 15 minutes asking GPT whether it's the right thing to do.
It's the 7 habits of highly effective people, sharpening the saw before you go and cut down the tree, right? Take the time to do it before you do it. Okay, interesting. I'm sure that there's so much more we could talk about, but I'm as you know, I love to be able to give some top tips and tools for people so they can actually go away. Otherwise, it's a beautiful, inspiring conversation, but not much they can actually do. So what would you suggest? Somebody who's listening in now thinking, yeah, you know what? Maybe my marketing isn't working as hard as it could be. I'm hearing from the conversation we've had, the way you approach marketing is probably the way we as EOS implementers approach business. It's very structured. There's a lot of thought that goes behind it. It's about being very clear about what you want to achieve and who your target market is. So yeah, so they're sitting in there listening, kind of going, "Yep, I've got my business sorted, but I'm not too sure about my marketing. What is it they say? I'm doing lots of marketing, but I'm not seeing results, or I'm doing lots of marketing, but I'm not sure what's working, what's not." What would you share?
So a couple of quick, easy wins. I would say understand human behavior more. So I mean, if I throw out some tech, for instance, if you're sending out emails, do you have the tech in place to know who's opening things, who's clicking on things, whether that's newsletters or even just personal emails? Like some of that information can be so valuable. But then the other thing that I put every single person onto is any form of website tracking tool. So Microsoft Clarity, really popular for me because it's free. It's got a lot of information, but you're going to immediately be able to know, okay, where are people scrolling on my website? Which of my pages has places where people are clicking and that's not even a button? So many simple things where if you've spent the effort getting somebody to your website, let's figure out what they're doing when they're there. because that's where the real money gets made. So yeah, understanding that human behavior is yes, it's a data point, but this is probably more qualitative data that I'm encouraging people to gather. Next, second tip, we touched on this a fair bit actually, but I always say niche and target. So, we creating ICPs,
Now, you've used that terminology twice, and I think I know what it means, but I'm just going to ask. So ICP,
ideal customer persona.
that's what I thought it meant.
I made an effort to say it out loud before, and then I got lazy. I usually hate using jargon too, so that's really poor effort on my part. So yes, creating yourself, essentially what I mean by this is create the psychographic profile of the top 2 or 3 types of people that you're trying to do business with. So, and from a tools standpoint, get AI just to be your sounding board on this. But essentially, here's a way to do it. Think about 3 of the best customers you've got and sort of profile them a little bit. Don't profile their demographics. It's not how old they are and what they do for work and what their family is. Da, da, da. It's the pain point. What keeps them up at night? What are they trying to achieve aspirationally? And then what is the type of language that they respond to? Now, if you know those 3 things and you create 3 specific profiles, you'd be stunned how differently your messaging would come across from a marketing standpoint. So if you created that profile and fed it into any of the AI models and said, hey, I've got this ad that I'm thinking of running. How does this ad sound if you were this particular ideal customer? And you'd be stunned how often you go, oh, actually, I was just talking about my business in general. I didn't answer any of that person's pain points at all, or I didn't attract them aspirationally. So that's a quick, easy tip and win, I think. I've got some tools that I happily freely share with anybody as well. If they want some guidance on, sort of the right questions to ask, I've got a custom GPT I can share.
Put a link to your site, obviously, in the notes so they can actually get to that. Perfect.
And then the last thing, and I'm huge on this, is give value freely. So we talked about this already with your packages, for instance. But, I think we're in a world where there is so much noise that if you aren't prepared to give value up front, if you're too guarded, then you will never break through. Now, when I talk about value, I don't mean give the whole thing away. Don't sort of give people how you do everything or
Not the secret sauce.
yeah, exactly. And don't go and, don't go and complete a service without agreeing to get paid for it. But there is always going to be a small bit of value that you can offer up front about what you do that will essentially open the door because, and this is the important thing, I think the reason you need to give that value is for a lot of customers, you need to show people that the problem can be solved because too many people are sitting in this basket of it's too hard. I don't even want to think about it. So, you could highlight a pain point and a problem, but if you don't give them this glimmer that you can help them solve it or it's solvable, they'll just keep going. They'll be like, yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think it's possible. I love it. Okay. So understand that human behavior more, use some tools to kind of really understand what's going on. Be very, very clear about your niche and your target, psychographics, not demographics, and then give the value freely, only with the intention of showing them that the problem can be solved. So it gives them a bit of hope and therefore they might want to talk to you. And I think we often forget some of the stuff that we know intrinsically. I come from a sales and marketing background. There's stuff that I've been doing for 55 years. I'm not quite 55. I think I came out of the womb just about in business, but not quite. But yeah, that's stuff that we just know because we know it. It's often stuff that other people don't know, and they will know stuff that you don't know. So there's plenty of stuff that you can give that just gives them a little bit of an understanding of who you are and help them solve those problems. Beautiful. Okay, great. I love it. I love all of it. I mean, there's some really great practical stuff in there. As I say, I think the way that you approach marketing sounds very much like the way we approach business and EOS in terms of having a structured framework and not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but, iteratively improving things over time, which is the best way to do it, looking at what's working, what's not working. I've really appreciated you sharing your knowledge and your information freely.
No, well, that was my last point, wasn't it? I really enjoy the educating. I always said if I win lotto, I would still do what I do. I just wouldn't charge anyone for it.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds good. But you love what you do. It certainly makes life a whole lot easier. Hey, Brendan, look, thank you so much for your time today. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.